What is Fragment? What is it about? What is special about this novel? What makes it unique? Today, in what I refer to as the second episode of my Analyses specials, we take a look at the novel by Warren Fahy and delve into the world building, plot, and science behind the 2009 science fiction horror novel. Hello everyone, this is Saberrex, and in this video we will be covering the characters, creatures, and plots of books and films such as the Primitive War franchise, the Inheritance Cycle, the Dragon Prince, Fairy Tale, and so much more. So without further ado, welcome, one and all. So, to start off, Fragment is a story about a group of scientific researchers on board a vessel known as the Trident, coming across an unexplored island full of deadly wildlife in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. After a terrible loss of life, the island is quarantined and explored, with the few survivors of the original incident coming to realize that the island's wildlife presents a threat to anything and everything should it manage to escape. Herein is where we will discuss the plot. For anyone who hasn't read this book, I am giving you a major spoiler warning. If you do not wish to have the story spoiled for you, I would recommend you skip further ahead in the video. If spoilers do not bother you, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The plot starts off with the crew of a British naval vessel discovering the island in the year 1791. The captain, Ambrose Spencer Henders, attempts to stop to replenish his ship's supply of water. To that end, he sends a small rowboat to find an entry point to the island, which essentially looks like a large fortress of rock with no visible landing points, save for a crack and chasm leading further into the interior of the island. One man, Henry Frears, manages to get to shore and throw down several barrels of water to the waiting rowboat before he is attacked by unknown creatures, causing Captain Henders to retreat, but not before firing several cannonballs into the chasm as a means of deterring whatever creatures lie within. More than 200 years later, a science reality show called Sea Life, created by producer Cynthia Leeds, is sailing aboard a research vessel known as the Trident towards Pitcairn Island to conclude the show's current season. On board are scientists Nell Duckworth, her friend Andy Beasley, and various other colleagues, as well as their bull terrier mascot, Copepod. Nell, a botanist, hopes to discover new species of plants, including one she might be able to name after her late mother, Janet Duckworth, a wildlife expert and host of her own show, Janet Planet, who died as the result of an accident involving deadly jellyfish. Andy, meanwhile, struggles to deal with the rest of the crew when they tease him as he tries to lecture on marine arthropods, the latest show of his feeling that no one respects him or takes him seriously. As the crew prepares for a wind-down of the show and makes its heading for Pitcairn, the ship's captain, Captain Saul, detects an EPIRB signal coming from the nearby Henders Island. The EPIRB, a distress signal, means that the crew of the ship that launched it is in need of rescue, and so, to that end, the crew of the Trident heads to the island, excited by the prospect of both rescuing whoever might be stranded there and investigating an unexplored island. However, what starts out as a rescue mission turns into something else entirely. Upon making landfall, Nell and several of the scientists, her friends Glynn, Jesse, Dawn, and cameraman Zero Monroe find no trace of any survivors when they investigate the wreckage of the ship, referred to as the Balboa Bilbo. The dog Copepod goes with them. As they explore further up the beach and into the crevice granting entry to the island, Nell notices something strange. Looking closer, she notices strange creatures similar to ants but unlike anything she's ever seen, and realizing the potential danger they may face when they start to act aggressively, she tries to get her friends to retreat. However, Jesse, Dawn, and Glynn have made it to the top of the island, close to its jungle. The remarkable discovery is interrupted when Dawn suddenly is attacked by what appears to be a tree that fires sharp darts that begin siphoning her blood. Glynn and Jesse are also attacked, and a wide array of creatures, both alien and ferocious, kill and devour them. Only Nell and Zero manage to escape back to their motorboats, while Copepod is presumed dead. However, during their escape, they are pursued by giant predatory creatures twice the size of water buffalo, creatures Nell refers to as spigers. The death of Jesse, Glynn, and Dawn are inadvertently caught on film, ending the show and Cynthia's dreams of expanding it further. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Dr. Jeffrey Binswanger lectures at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in what become known as fireside chats, where he proposes radical theories to the scientific community and to the public, who are invited to join and listen to the lecture while wearing one outlandish piece of clothing. Among these theories, he proposes that the predator-prey relationship was also the origin of sexual reproduction, and that reproduction is the reason for mortality in almost all living organisms, as a means of preventing inbreeding between parent organisms and their offspring. When not lecturing, Jeffrey works as a visiting associate for Woods Hole, where he helps to study arthropods. Jeffrey, often razzed by his colleague, Angel Echeverria, for being a handsome, single scientist, also gets word of the Sea Life video after the live feed revealed the deaths of members of the crew. Most of the people around the world, however, believe it was a hoax, perpetuated to end the show's season. Likewise, another scientist, Thatcher Redmond, an older and hypocritical intellectual who believes that intelligent life is a detriment to the biosphere, also believes that the Sea Life video is a hoax. Additionally, Thatcher proves himself to be extremely conniving, and as we are shown when he meets his ex-girlfriend and her son, his love child, to be downright murderous, as he sneakily allows the toddler to run out into the pool and drown when his mother is not looking, taking great care not to implicate himself and leaving no trace behind to connect him to his crime. Indeed, the character of Thatcher Redmond is extremely unlikable off the bat, even without taking this scene into account. In addition to being a hypocrite and being willing to commit murder, he is also a gambler willing to break every rule he sets for himself, which has resulted in him being in significant debt without letting on about it. But back on Hender's Island, a secret mission is underway. Nell, now working alongside her former mentor, Dr. Wayne Cato, leads a team to study the wildlife on Hender's Island. 8 days after the events that took the lives of her friends on the beach, 3 U.S. Navy ships have been called in to help ascertain the threats that the island's creatures pose. Using a specially created lab constructed by NASA known as Stat Lab, Nell, Andy, Dr. Cato, Otto Inman, and Quentin Brancato use and deploy specially designed traps from inside the hermetically sealed laboratory to capture specimens for research. Their first discovery is a creature they later refer to as a Hender's rat, which, after analyzing its DNA and its unique biology, is determined to be a highly evolved and divergent arthropod resembling a mammal. Inside the trough, where they examine the specimen using specially designed gloves, they are able to make many discoveries regarding its biology before Otto is attacked by the dead creature's offspring, which cut their way out of its womb. Otto is airlifted to a medical station on board one of the ships as a result, and the specimen is euthanized. However, their troubles are not over yet. Desperate for footage on the inside of the island, Cynthia, stuck aboard the Trident, agrees to let one of the remaining cast members from Sea Life explore the island under cover of darkness. The man in question, Dante manages to make it partway up the canyon that leads deeper into the island, but is attacked by strange flying creatures called cliff gliders, as well as a spider and another strange creature he does not recognize. Dante is forced to cut his own rope and plummets voluntarily to his death to keep from being eaten. The devastating event leaves Cynthia and the rest of the crew horrified and results in them being punished by the military, who do not want word of the island getting out until the threat level is measured. Back on the island, and within Stat Lab, the next few days result in more discoveries, including creatures such as disc ants, drill worms, and many more. Nell and her team discover that the creatures on Hender's Island belong to an order of crustaceans most closely related to mantis shrimp, but far more advanced, having evolved separately on the island largely since the Cambrian period. As a result, they have evolved to move faster, react quicker, reproduce constantly, and respond to any threat or potential prey with increasing aggression. They also likewise discover that these animals are largely immune to any introduced virus or disease due to their ability to change the salinity of their blood in response to any pathogen. Introduced species that prove invasive in other environments on Earth, such as mongooses, pythons, giant dodder, kudzu, and any other creature or plant that poses a threat to ecosystems elsewhere, is destroyed, eaten, and replaced by native fauna from the island. An unusual substance nicknamed clover also begins to eat away at the lab, along with the creatures, referred to as clovores, that feed on this substance, dissolving its outer shell with sulfuric acid and compromising the integrity in one section. Such is the danger posed by Hender's Island's wildlife that the President of the United States even sends his envoy, Hamilton Pound, to investigate the threat on his behalf. Zero is allowed to return to the island to film and document the captured wildlife for the President to view. Nell reiterates to him everything that she has encountered and documented with her team. Eventually, Stat Lab's staff begins to evacuate due to the compromised hull caused by the clover and the creatures that eat it. However, the situation is not enough to stop Pound, Andy, Quentin, and Zero, along with their driver, from exploring into the jungle using a sealed vehicle referred to as the XATV-9 rover. Exploring into the island's jungle, the group encounters many creatures, all of them frighteningly violent towards one another and engaged in what is essentially a perpetual feeding frenzy. They also spot a creature Nell has briefly glimpsed multiple times throughout their analysis of the island's creatures, when it would appear outside the windows near the jungle. The rover eventually makes its way toward the freshwater lake in the interior of the island, where the group deploys an ROV to glimpse what lives within the lake. Among other things, they discover that giant mantis shrimp the size of a Tyrannosaurus rex live beneath the surface, alongside alien life forms of unrivaled beauty and mystery. However, the rover breaks down due to the sulfuric acid created from running over clovores, as well as the clover itself. In short order, the giant mantis shrimp begin attacking the rover, and the group is forced to flee, escaping by way of burning the predators with flamethrowers kept in the event of wildlife attacking the base. Quentin is killed by one of the plant-like creatures when he tries to examine it, while Andy is snatched away by the creature Nell saw. Pound and the driver are killed and devoured by the creatures on the island, including the deadly spiders, while Zero manages to escape by running erratically until he reaches a pool of salt water at the base of the cliff where he and Nell first encountered the wildlife. Diving into the pond, he and Nell, who has been watching the calamity through the live camera on Zero's head, realize that the creatures are afraid of salt water, and that it is deadly to them when one of the creatures immediately dies and drowns after diving in after him. Soaking himself as protection, Zero manages to escape back to Stat Lab, where he is rescued by Nell before they evacuate the now completely compromised laboratory. The damage to the laboratory is now so great that most of the remaining scientists who have not evacuated are killed and eaten when the wild creatures break through the last barrier. Nell and Zero barely managed to escape aboard a helicopter, now fully aware of the danger all of these creatures pose to the wider world. Later, Jeffrey Binswanger and Thatcher Redmond are recruited by the President of the United States to investigate Hender's Island. Brought to the island by way of military aircraft and naval ships, Jeffrey meets Nell for the first time, and they are brought inside the newly constructed base known as the Trigon. Fully protected by tanks filled with salt water, the Trigon serves as the replacement for StatLab after its destruction by the local wildlife. Inside, a group of scientists from across the world have been brought together to determine the fate of the island and all its creatures. There, Nell explains a frightening reality. All of the creatures on Hender's Island that she encountered or has documented alongside her mentor are too dangerous to allow any to escape. Because the wildlife from the island consists entirely of weed species that can replace anything and everything within an environment they invade, they would cause complete global collapse. Nothing from outside the island can survive on Hender's Island, and they would destroy entire ecosystems within a matter of decades. Every species that she has encountered or documented on the island is essentially a walking apocalypse. The only thing that has prevented this thus far is the fact that salt water is toxic to the creatures of the island, as they do not have the ability to osmoregulate. Realizing the gravity of this situation, the President asks Nell what her recommendation is to stop this potential threat from being unleashed. To that end, Nell recommends destroying the island with a nuclear bomb, stating it is the only way to ensure its creatures never escape. Jeffrey questions as to whether any intelligent life could live here at all, hoping to halt the destruction long enough to see if any benevolent species exist on the island. Thatcher Redmond, meanwhile, believes that destroying this ecosystem is the worst thing humanity can do. However, the meeting is interrupted by a signal coming from a nearby area of the island, signifying a potential survivor. Therefore, a rescue mission is approved. Along the way, Jeffrey discovers many truths about the island that destroy his theories, including that several species of organisms resembling vines exist that farm their own food in the form of seabirds that come to the island to nest, the native organisms mimicking the parents to raise the chicks when the adults get eaten after laying their eggs. Thatcher is fascinated and struck by the island. His theory that intelligent life couldn't have possibly evolved here seemingly vindicated. However, this is turned on its head by an event that will change the world. The group, consisting of Nell, Dr. Cato, Jeffrey, Thatcher, and their driver, a military officer named Kane, run into Andy and Copepod, who have miraculously survived. When predators attack them, a mysterious figure, the same one that snatched Andy, returns to save them, revealing itself to be a highly intelligent organism. Using its quick reflexes, the creature, named Hender by Andy, kills many of the attackers, causing the swarm of beasts and bugs to turn away to feed. Dr. Cato sacrifices himself so that the group can escape. Hender then directs them to his home, where they will be safe, with Andy reassuring them that they can trust their mysterious savior. With Andy and Hender leading the way, they enter what is essentially one of the few trees and true plants on the island. Hender reveals himself to be both a talented mimic, enough to learn, understand, and eventually speak human language in a short amount of time from watching the group. With the exception of Thatcher, Nell and her friends are openly welcoming towards Hender, who reveals himself to be one of 5 surviving members of his species, which Andy refers to as hendropods, while the creatures themselves call themselves cells. From Hender, the group learns that Hender was alive to see humans discover the island more than 220 years before, and that it was he who activated the EPIRB, as Hender came to realize the island was in trouble. Earthquakes had been happening more frequently in the area of ocean around the island, and the island was becoming unstable, meaning it was ready to sink beneath the sea. To that end, Hender used human technology to call for help after learning how to use it. They likewise learn that his species is biologically immortal due to the heavy predation pressures of the island and their own ability to turn invisible through the ability to change color and refract light using their fur and the crests on their heads. The group also learns from Hender's fossil collection that Hender's Island may have also been the origin point for the Cambrian explosion, and the origin for all arthropod evolution. Realizing they cannot let Hender's species be driven to extinction by their actions, Nell contacts the Trident, as Kane has not made contact with his superiors. Unbeknownst to them, Thatcher planned this. So desperate to keep his credibility intact and so desperate to keep from being proven wrong about intelligent life being a threat to the ecosystems of the world, Thatcher quietly sabotages their initial plans. Unbeknownst to him, however, Nell successfully contacts Captain Saul aboard the Trident, convincing them to help. When another earthquake hits the island and predatory spygers attack the tree, killing Kane, the group flees in Hender's homemade elevator, which leads down to the beach. All 5 Hendropods help the humans to escape and join them in escaping the island via the dinghy sent from the Trident just as another earthquake hits. Hender nearly drowns when he falls into the water, but is rescued by Andy. Once on board, Nell helps the Hendropods recover and settle in, and ends up falling for Jeffrey in the calm after the earthquake. As the crew of the Trident flees the island, Hender thanks Nell for saving him and his species, and Nell ends up falling asleep with Jeffrey. Unbeknownst to them, Thatcher has smuggled several Hender's rats on board and leaves them to kill the crew and escape into the global ecosystem while escaping in the dinghy. He then calls in the military, saying that the crew of the Trident is smuggling live specimens off the island. This causes the military to intervene, and they warn the Trident to stand down in preparation to be boarded or to be fired upon, as the Hender's rats attack. The Hendropods kill all of the Hender's rats, while Cynthia and Zero use a live feed to contact the President and coax the Hendropods into revealing themselves. The live reaction reaches millions of people, including the President. The military is therefore ordered to stand down and ask permission to come aboard and meet their new neighbors from this previously unknown species. Thatcher, thinking he has gotten away, inadvertently opens a jar filled with creatures from Hender's Island, which promptly devour him inside the deflating raft in the middle of the ocean, ending his nefarious schemes once and for all. The threat of the island's remaining wildlife is also finally ended when the U.S. military sends a fighter jet to drop a nuclear warhead on the island, eliminating all of the species that lived there, destroying it. Back aboard the Trident, the story concludes with Hender, Nell, and Jeffrey watching the sunrise, facing an uncertain future in which humanity now shares the planet with another sentient species, a future they will face together. In the sections containing scientific illustrations and a map of the island, it is also later revealed that Nell and Jeffrey eventually married, but that is a story for another time, which is covered in the sequel, called Pandemonium. With the plot now properly explained, it's time to explore in depth the science behind the story. Much of the science Warren Fahy uses is genuine, though some of it is elaborated on for the purpose of furthering the story. At present, the extremism seen in the organisms in the book are generally only seen in real species that have been isolated for long periods of time, within areas otherwise inaccessible to outside forces, such as those seen on very isolated islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or in caves where creatures have evolved to take advantage of a world without light and little food. Much of the research on crustaceans that the author used for the basis of the story came from his consulting with Dr. Donald Lovett, one of the foremost authorities on osmoregulation in crustaceans. Many other people helped to contribute to this book, either in helping to edit it, further the research that served as the basis for the organisms in the story, or in helping to cement the story in realism by way of character development, or in the science behind it, including paleontology. The premise behind an entire ecosystem unknown to science being discovered on a remote island is not unprecedented. In fact, it's more common than one might be led to believe. Warren Fahy makes this very clear with many of the scientific articles he posts on his website at warrenfahy.com. Indeed, the earliest of these articles on the website, which dates back to September 6, 2009, talks about an expedition to Papua New Guinea, in which scientists discovered a volcanic crater identical in size to Hender's Island, or approximately 2 miles wide. Within, they found rare species that had been largely, if not completely, isolated from the rest of the world, including birds, mammals, insects, reptiles, and amphibians. Regarding the creatures themselves, their design is remarkably alien yet vaguely familiar and exhibits incredible originality while remaining grounded in scientific basis. Their anatomy is based off of that seen in many living arthropods today, including having copper-based blood, which makes their blood turn blue when exposed to oxygen. Likewise, many of the adaptations of insects serve them well in regards to speed and abilities. Stranger still, instead of having book lungs like insects, the respiratory system of the creatures in Fragment are more similar to those of mammals, showing just how divergent they really are. Their rapid reproductive rate is also based in fact, but clearly enhanced. Some aspects, however, remain completely fictional, as with any science fiction story of this caliber. Additionally, the discovery of brand new species, just like that in the book, is a common occurrence in science. Every year, many new species are described, with the average being about 5,000 to 18,000 species discovered per year. With Fragment using this as the basis for its science fiction horror setup, this grounds the book even more in reality. Moreover, the science of new species evolving in isolation is nothing new. Many examples can be found both throughout modern history and prehistory alike of such creatures. The dodo, for example, is a case of insular gigantism, a flightless pigeon that has grown to such a large size that it no longer needed to fly. Galapagos tortoises are another. The same was also true during the age of dinosaurs, with species like Europasaurus and Telmatosaurus all shrinking down in size due to limited resources present on their island homes. This was also true for the mammoths of Wrangel Island and the Channel Islands. Fragment takes this even a step further, creating an ultra-competitive environment in which evolutionary pressure favors weed species that can reproduce rapidly in order to overcome a lack of resources, which in turn causes the creatures to become more aggressive. The idea of invisibility granting animals immortality is also a fascinating subject, something explored with the evolution of the Andropods in the story. Like octopuses, they have the ability to change color, but they take it a step further in being able to turn nearly completely invisible. As a result, they were able to slow down enough to think in the environment to the point where they eventually gained sentience. This is explored more in the sequel book, as it is shown that they also had unique cultures and even a civilization. Whatever the case, they represent a unique yet technically feasible evolutionary branch, one that could easily have occurred in times past had evolution played out a little bit differently. Warren's illustration skills also flush out these creatures quite nicely. making them into believable yet terrifyingly alien and dangerous obstacles for the characters to face. Many of the characters are well fleshed out, and in particular, Nell herself is quite relatable. She struggles with trauma, adversity, and overcoming insurmountable odds, mostly posed by the creatures on the island and her desire to save as many people as she can from them. She also goes through her own bit of character development as she learns that not every creature on the island is malevolent, which leads to her friendship with Hender at the climax and the end of the story, and finally learns to settle down and fall in love. Indeed, she's arguably the most likable character. The romance is not as well developed as it could be for her character, but it suffices. And sometimes you do not need an intricate love story in order for a relationship to work in a novel, especially one that focuses more on scientific discoveries, strange creatures, and survival at any cost. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Thatcher Redmond serves as the major human villain in his greed for fame, his desire to not be held accountable, keep his status as an influential scientist engaging in public opinion, being willing to commit murder, break his own rules, as stated before, and even wipe out humanity in what is clearly a descent into complete insanity, just to prove his point that intelligent life is the biggest threat to the global ecosystems of planet Earth. He, as a result, stands as a great example of quiet villainy. While I do believe he could be more nuanced as a villain, he certainly serves the story well in his role as the main antagonist, and he's very realistic in that he doesn't have any powers or grandiose plans. He's just a cowardly hypocrite, willing to do the most depraved misdeeds in order to prove himself in the right. The fact that no one ever found out about his plans is a testament to his cunning and cleverness, and it isn't until Book 2 that his demise is eventually found out by the main characters. Had that not been undone by his own arrogance and a simple mistake on his part, it's very likely he would have succeeded. Many in real life who display this kind of behavior end up paying for the consequences of those types of actions, no matter how long it ends up taking. The character of Hender adds a unique nuance to the story, as he represents an intelligence completely separate from and alien to that of a human, but still able to understand what humans can do and what they are like. The intelligence and openly trusting nature of Hender can be seen as representative of another sentient being longing for both the help of and contact with intelligence from another species. Hender develops even more as a character in Book 2, and his take on humanity in Pandemonium is most interesting and allows us to reflect on human nature versus that of another and much older intelligence. But that's a story analysis for another time. More than this, Hender represents the penultimate result of what might happen when humanity reaches out and makes contact with another sentient species. He represents the desire to connect, to share, and to survive, as well as showcasing that even in a hostile environment, not every creature in that environment is potentially lethal, as the main character quickly learns after meeting him and his species. Fragment also goes into the consequences of letting such a dangerous environment loose upon humanity, and it does not hold back. As stated before, when describing the plot, the risk of letting the creatures on Hender's Island, aside from the Hendropods, leave would be catastrophic to the ecosystem. Invasive species today, including Burmese pythons, kudzu, silver carp, lanternflies, snakehead fish, and many other species besides, are extremely dangerous to environments that aren't adapted to accommodate them. They upend the natural balance in those areas. They also drive out species that find it more difficult to compete with them, or in some cases, such as those of predatory invasive species, simply eat them outright. They can also cause damage and are expensive to eliminate in many cases. The invasive species present in the book are even worse, capable of inflicting global apocalypse through their appetites and their superior adaptations. As such, The decision becomes very clear that in order to safeguard the ecosystems of the rest of the world along with humanity itself, the island had to be eliminated, especially considering that corruption and attempts to weaponize the deadly wildlife of the island were also seen as potential hazards. This is not something to be taken lightly, as humans have altered or damaged many ecosystems either through accidents, greed, or ignorance. Humanity has also driven many species to extinction through habitat destruction across its relatively long history, or through overhunting, or in some cases even disease. In Fragment, Warren Fahy makes it very clear as to this being an exceedingly hard choice to make, and why it had to be done. In this regard, he paints a tense atmosphere that showcases the consequences of action and inaction, likewise keeping the reader engaged and making them measure the costs of these decisions. It is for this reason why I love Fragment so much. It's more than just a science fiction story. Its themes of discovery, survival, the weight of consequences, and facing the unknown make it stand out as a great science fiction story, strongly grounded in reality yet fantastic enough to draw the attention of the reader. Moreover, the book itself contains many illustrations of the many creatures within in order to showcase the threats that the characters of the book face across its plot. As such, I truly would recommend this to any person out looking for a good science fiction book involving high-stakes decisions and ferocious predators to pit humanity against. That in mind, I think this is a good place to end this video. If you enjoyed this video and reached the end, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe for more content like this. It is greatly appreciated, and every bit of appreciation from you, the viewers, helps to make the channel grow so that others who might be interested might stumble across it and enjoy it themselves. Until next time, thank you all for tuning in. See you next time.